On this Wednesday night, the new recommendation about wearing face masks in public. Why advice from Canada's top doctor has evolved.
Thinking of it as I'm protecting you and you're protecting me.
The childcare crunch for parents and pleas for help.
That's a long history of politicians thinking childcare is just a private family responsibility.
Small business desperate for rent relief. Why a federal plan doesn't measure up. From downplaying COVID-19 to upheaval, harsh realities in countries with the worst outbreaks. And drawing up a survival plan, the precarious future of museums beyond the pandemic.
Global National with Dawna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. As parts of the country continue to lift public health restrictions and more people begin to gather in shops and on public transit, there is new guidance tonight from Canada's Chief Public Health Officer about masks. Dr. Theresa Tam now recommends wearing a non-medical mask in situations where physical distancing is not possible.
When we got more evidence about asymptomatic and pre-symptomatic individuals, and that although we don't fully understand their role in transmission, it is an added layer of protection, even for people who don't have symptoms, to wear a mask to prevent transmission to others.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau took the advice today, wearing a mask as he was driven to Parliament Hill for an in-person sitting of the House of Commons. Non-medical masks are recommended, not mandatory, as a way of protecting others from you. Public health officials stress they are not a substitute for hand washing and physical distancing, which are still the best ways to protect yourself from infection. And though restrictions are beginning to ease, the virus has not gone away. It's still out there, and a second wave of infections is possible. Some say even likely, even in places like Nova Scotia, which reported only one new case today.
I heard lots of people saying, oh, the pandemic's over. Wave one is coming to an end. That's very different than the pandemic is over. So it's important that we continue to follow the public health rules even as we enter the recovery phase.
Provinces are making decisions about how to reopen based on the number of new COVID-19 cases trending downward. There are regional differences, of course, but overall there have been fewer than 1,200 daily new cases reported across Canada for the past 4 days in a row. The curve has flattened in most places. 8 provinces and territories are reporting just 1 or no new cases for at least 2 days now. Ontario and Quebec have a distance to go. There's good news in Quebec, though. New case numbers there dropped below 600 for the second day in a row, with 578 new cases reported today. Ontario had 390 new cases, down from yesterday, but daily new case numbers did dip below 300 earlier this month. Reopening the economy means many people are going back to work. And if you have young children with no childcare or school to send them to, it is a tricky juggling act. Mike Le Couteur reports.
Okay, go.
As provinces try to get their economies back up and flying again, many parents like Sharif Mahmoud face the childcare conundrum. He's expected to be at the office at least a few days a week, but schools and daycares are still closed.
I might have to go to the office sometimes, and then my wife would watch the kids, and then alternatively, like, she might have to go to the office or have meetings, and then I would stay home with the kids and work from home.
Can you show me which one?
But not everyone has that flexibility, and it's exposing the importance of childcare in this country. Global News has confirmed Social Development Minister Ahmed Hussein is looking at ways of providing provinces with more money for childcare on an annual basis. The Prime Minister noted it was a campaign promise and is now more pressing because of the pandemic.
We made more commitments on childcare, of working with the provinces to invest in programs that will help more parents, more families, and grow our economies and our communities. We need to continue to do that, particularly right now, and we will be there to work with the provinces as we reopen and respond to childcare needs.
The penny has dropped for a lot of people who weren't paying enough attention.
Childcare policy expert Dr. Susan Prentice says now that politicians are paying attention, Canada needs to create a national childcare system, something the Royal Commission on the Status of Women recommended 50 years ago.
if I can be blunt, it's mainly men doing decision making. And I think that that's a long history of politicians thinking childcare is just a private family responsibility.
Without the return of childcare in most provinces, families are on their own to juggle their jobs and their children. And many parents say it's difficult to look too far down the road without knowing who will care for their kids.
Right now, without those support resources, it's almost impossible for parents to return to the office full time.
Start again like we did last.
Something governments need to consider as they attempt to relaunch their economies. Mike Le Couteur, Global News, Ottawa.
In Manitoba, which reported no new cases today, some things are opening up sooner than was first planned. Starting on Friday, groups up to 25 will be able to gather indoors, and groups of up to 50 people will be able to get together outdoors. Plans are also underway to allow limited outdoor visits at personal care homes, which will be a relief for those who have been unable to visit loved ones for more than 2 months now. Protocols on how that will work are still being put into place. And to help get costs under control, the Manitoba government is asking employees to take 5 unpaid days off work by next April. In a memo to workers, the Central Services Minister says more than 6,000 public servants from the deputy minister level down would be affected, but not essential employees delivering pandemic services. The province says the proposal, which needs union approval, would save $9.5 million. Premier Brian Pallister is taking a 25% pay cut. Big businesses can now apply for emergency federal loans. The Large Employers Emergency Financing Facility, or LEAF, is open to companies in all sectors that generate more than $300 million in revenue annually. Businesses must be looking for financing of $60 million or more. There are conditions attached, and no portion of the loan is forgivable. Many small businesses are also desperate for help and fear they are on the verge of eviction. David Akin is looking at the federal rent subsidy program tonight. David.
Well, Dawna, applications will open for the commercial rent relief program on May the 25th, and relief will be available retroactively for April and for May and can be had for June, but only landlords, not tenants, can apply for rent relief. Landlords can get a forgivable loan worth 50% of a tenant's rent. The tenant will have to pay 25% and the landlord will have to cover the rest. But many landlords say they will not apply for a program that would essentially commit them to writing off 25% of a tenant's rent.
We'll now go on to Mr. Seaback.
During a virtual meeting of MPs, Conservative Kyle Seaback read an email he received from a landlord.
Why do I have to apply? It's not my problem. The tenant needs to pay.
Seaback and others say the relief should go directly to the tenant.
By putting all of the burden on the landlord or all of the privilege on the landlord, whether they choose to apply for this rent subsidy or not, they are putting small businesses in this country in serious jeopardy.
The Canadian Federation of Independent Business surveyed their small business members. Half said they will not make the June rent, and 1/5 now fear eviction.
The stress of this is through the stratosphere for many small business owners who don't have the help they need, who are struggling to hang on, and this is make or break.
But Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says landlords should get with the program.
Landlords need to be a part of the solution on this. We need them to understand that they do have a deep vested interest in keeping their renters in those spaces.
Ontario's Premier, too, had a message for landlords.
Nothing drives me more crazy than greedy landlords taking advantage of people and small business owners that are just trying to keep their head above water.
Now, Ford's comment might be a popular one, but business groups have been saying for weeks now that premiers and provincial governments need to do more to help save businesses on main streets around the country. Dawna?
David Akin in Ottawa, thanks. Members of a Mohawk community in Quebec have blocked access to a provincial park that was set to partially reopen today. The road leads into Oka Provincial Park, northwest of Montreal. Grand Chief in nearby Ganasatake urged Premier François Legault to keep the park closed. He says trails lead directly into the community and visitors could expose residents to the coronavirus. There are now more than 5 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world, More than 1.5 million of them are in the U.S., the #1 country for COVID-19. Russia is now in second place with just over 308,000 cases, and Brazil is in third with more than 270,000 confirmed cases. Its daily death toll keeps rising, too. The country's health system is teetering on the brink of collapse. Brazil's president, though, is dismissing concerns. And as Eric Sorensen explains, he's advocating the use of hydroxychloroquine, the same drug President Trump says he is taking.
Brazil is rapidly becoming ground zero for the coronavirus. Outlying areas don't have intensive care beds. Some patients are being airlifted. Hospitals are reportedly on the brink of being overwhelmed. And yet, on Sunday, Brazil's President Bolsonaro posed with crowds that were crammed together. The government has supported treatment, said Bolsonaro. We hope soon we'll be free of the issue. Congratulations to us all. But Brazil has seen its highest COVID-19 numbers just this week.
In daily confirmed cases, Brazil is over 17,000, right behind the United States at close to 20,000. Russia is reporting 9,000 cases per day. India, a little over 5,000. Obviously, population makes a difference. Canada is in a group of among 10 countries at over 1,000 daily cases. Now, this is the global picture of the daily confirmed deaths. Canada among a group of countries with between 50 and 250 deaths per day. Mexico has jumped above 250. The UK has moved back above 500. Brazil is consistently above 500 deaths per day, and the United States still averaging more than 1,000 deaths per day. And these are some of the countries where the leaders have been criticized for downplaying the coronavirus in the early days.
We can send a coronavirus packing.
Critics say Britain's Prime Minister failed to take the virus seriously for too long. Then he got the disease. The Russian government was accused of downplaying the disease, and American President Trump suggested the first U.S. case numbers would go down, not up.
Within a couple of days, it's going to be down to close to zero.
Now, the U.S., Russia, and Brazil have the most confirmed cases in the world.
It illustrates that all three countries have failed to have a coordinated nationwide approach to public health restrictions.
Brazil is a brewing formula for catastrophe. Bolsonaro supporters in crowded protests defying the virus amid some of the most densely populated cities in the world. Bolsonaro is seen as Latin America's Donald Trump, and yet Trump is now considering a travel ban on Brazil.
No, Brazil is having some trouble. No question about it.
A stark image, mass grave sites in Brazil. One emergency official says bluntly, we're losing the battle against the virus. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The woman who died in the crash of a Snowbirds jet on Sunday was remembered in Halifax today. At the Navy dockyard, a spokesperson for the Canadian Armed Forces read a statement on behalf of Captain Jen Casey's family. They say their daughter died supporting an important mission that seemed to be designed for her.
Operation Inspiration is a mission with one focus: making Canadians happy in a time of uncertainty. And there was no better person in this world to carry out that mission than Jen. Her beautiful smile and positively infectious personality could brighten anyone's day.
Casey grew up in Halifax. She worked as a journalist before starting in a career as a public affairs officer for the Snowbirds. The 35-year-old's family says Nova Scotia will be their daughter's final resting place. The jet she was in crashed shortly after takeoff on Sunday in Kamloops, BC. The Snowbirds had been on a cross-country tour to raise Canadian spirits during the COVID-19 pandemic. An emergency on top of the pandemic. Coming up, what triggered the floods ravaging parts of Michigan, plus a new regal honor for Captain Tom Moore.
Evacuate the area.
Disaster in Michigan. 2 dams have burst, causing catastrophic flooding in the central part of the state. About 11,000 people have been told to flee their homes. The city of Midland could soon be under more than 2.5 meters of water. It is the worst flooding in years.
To go through this in the midst of a global pandemic is almost unthinkable. Continue to wear a face covering when you go to a shelter or go stay with a friend or relative. Please try to protect yourself if you are able.
The flooding follows days of heavy rain across the U.S. Midwest. There's also been widespread flooding in Illinois, Ohio, and other states. The U.S. is getting closer to business as usual. All 50 states have now begun phasing in plans to reopen. And though the numbers of new cases are dropping in some states, many have not met the federal criteria of a 14-day downward trajectory of cases. As of Tuesday, at least 17 states showed an upward trend in average daily cases, a rise of at least 10% over the previous 7 days. Only 16 states had a drop in new cases of 10% or more. Jackson Proskow reports.
As the U.S. economy sputters back to life, the road ahead has never looked more uncertain. Just 2 days after work resumed at a Ford plant outside Chicago, thousands of workers were sent home and production was halted after one employee tested positive for COVID-19.
Social distancing really doesn't work.
I'm upset that they're bringing us back so soon.
All 50 states are pressing ahead with full or partial reopening. There's nervousness about what will happen next as people return to stores and malls.
I feel like as long as we follow the guidelines that are out, then we'll be okay.
President Trump continues to project confidence as he champions the economy, tweeting that the G7 summit, called off due to the pandemic, should take place as originally scheduled in early June at Camp David. A great sign to all, normalization.
So, yes, we need to keep meeting as leaders. Whether that's virtual, in person, we'll certainly take a look at what the U.S. is proposing.
Safety measures remain a contentious issue in the U.S. In Michigan, barbers and stylists cut hair on the steps of the state capitol, defying orders to stay closed.
Our rights don't come from the government, they come from God. Simple as that.
While the Centers for Disease Control is facing criticism over 60 pages of reopening guidelines, they were amended to remove any mention of churches or religious institutions.
You can't be overly prescriptive. Not every state and every county and every jurisdiction has the same infection rate.
The guidelines give a glimpse of what the new normal may look like across America, with regular temperature checks recommended for teachers and students in schools, and restaurants told to use disposable dishes to prevent customers from spreading the virus as they slowly reopen their doors. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
Antarctica going green. Is this the beginning of a new ecosystem?
You're watching Global National.
More than 2 million people were told to flee their homes to avoid it, but Cyclone Amphan has already killed at least 15 people as it barreled into India and Bangladesh. The storm is the most powerful cyclone to make landfall in the region in 2 decades. It's destroyed hundreds of homes, downed trees, and whipped up storm surges along the coast. Climate change is causing parts of Antarctica to turn green. Warming temperatures are helping with the formation and spread of algae blooms. New research shows it's become so prolific in some places it's now visible from space. Scientists have created the first ever large-scale map of the algae and think it could potentially create a source of nutrition for other species and could form a new ecosystem. They believe the algae will keep spreading as global temperatures increase. Collection of closures next, the struggle to preserve museums in a pandemic.
I think Sir Thomas sounds very nice, but inside I haven't changed.
Humble as always, Captain Tom Moore, who has already been made an honorary colonel, is now going to be knighted by the Queen. The veteran raised more than £33 million for Britain's National Health Service by walking 100 laps in his garden before his 100th birthday. The Queen was one of thousands who sent him best wishes.
Never ever in the world did I anticipate that I would ever be knighted. It just didn't enter my head that it would, but it has.
On Twitter, he said, "I'm absolutely overwhelmed. Never for one moment could I have imagined I would be awarded with such a great honor. I'd like to thank Her Majesty the Queen, the Prime Minister, and the great British public. I will remain at your service." His spirit is inspirational, but it's the money he's raised that will really make a difference. Museums could use a benefactor right now, too. They rely on people. It's what they're designed for. But because of the pandemic, UNESCO, the UN cultural body, says 1 in 8 of the world's museums could close permanently. Redmond Shannon takes a look at how some are coping, hoping they have a future.
UNESCO says 85,000 museums worldwide have been forced to close during the COVID-19 pandemic. For those that have reopened, the do not touch signs have taken on a whole new meaning. Although physical distancing doesn't seem to be a big issue just yet.
Walking up the big staircase, there's nobody, so it's a strange, almost eerie experience.
And a far from relaxing experience for visitors or staff. Our financial losses are catastrophic, says a spokeswoman for Belgium's Museum of Fine Arts. Many museums struggle to make ends meet at the best of times, and after 2 months without revenue, they now need to heavily limit visitor numbers. This exhibition, marking 500 years since the death of Raphael, reopens in June.
We will be organizing small groups of around 6 people that will be welcomed by a guard, which will be a sort of a chaperone.
Canadians who've come to London will know the National Gallery, opposite Canada House in Trafalgar Square.
Like many London museums and galleries, it doesn't charge for entry, but it still relies heavily on suggested donations, its cafes and gift shops.
We quickly realised that we were, in effect, no longer a physical gallery. We'd become an online gallery.
The detailed website has been a way to welcome virtual visitors, but it's never quite the same.
One of the things about going to a museum is, you stand in front of a picture. It has a sort of physical relationship of scale with your body.
Getting those bodies in front of exhibits as soon as possible will be key to keeping museums afloat. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Dawna Friesen. We leave you tonight with Canada Post's newest stamp commemorating a century of radio in our country. On this day in 1920, members of the Royal Society of Canada gathered in Ottawa to hear the first wireless broadcast. Soprano Dorothy Lutton performing live in Montreal. Within 2 years, 34 radio stations were operating across the country. Thanks for watching. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.